Okay. I think we should give it like just a couple more minutes before we get started. We'll get into it.
Oh, we're not going to Denver, we're going to Amherst. I'm going to drop all of this into the chat really quick. These are links to the slides that I'm going to share because people always want to know, how do I find that? So
right.
I'll drop it in right now.
Perfect. I'm losing my control here of this phone. I just want to make sure I'm going to say hello, everyone. So bonjour, everyone. Welcome to this NAPO event. So excited to have Rena Priest, one of our inaugural NAPO fellows. And Ashley's going to do a formal introduction. I'm really just going to be hanging here with you, participating because I'm on my phone today. And so I don't have very many controls. I'm not a good phone Zoomer. So Ashley's going to take care of everything, but I just wanted to make sure I welcomed you and say how grateful we are for you coming out tonight.
Awesome. Thanks, Kim. I'll start introducing everyone. Welcome. My name's Ashley Houghton. I'm an enrolled citizen of the Muskogee Creek Nation and staff member here at NAPO. For those of you who aren't familiar with Indigenous Nations Poets, we're a national Indigenous poetry community committed to mentoring emerging writers, nurturing the growth of Indigenous poetic practices, and raising the visibility of Native writers past, present, and future. In 2022, we hosted 16 Indigenous poets for a gathering with Indigenous faculty, NAPO leaders, and U.S. Poet Laureate Joy Harjo at the Library of Congress. That week's events included workshops, craft talks, introduction to the collections at the Library of Congress, and readings by the faculty and fellows. We actually just created a new section of our website that has all of our retreat info and pictures and links to our reading videos on there. So I'm going to link that in the chat. But throughout the retreat, we embraced Indigenous values, aesthetics, and encouraged participants in their use of Indigenous languages. We are about to begin planning our 2023 retreat, so keep your eyes open for applications and make sure that you share it with anyone who you think would be interested. You can find us at our website, indigenousnationspoets.org. I'm going to link that. There we go. On Instagram at NAPO. I'm going to drop that in the chat as well. Bear with me here. Okay. Go. And then most recently on YouTube at youtube.com/@IndigenousNationsPoets. We're going to be posting a bunch of workshops, readings, all of that kind of fun stuff. So if you're interested, please share our page. And then lastly, if you'd like to support our future workshops and 2023 retreat, please make sure to make a donation at our Kindful page, which I am also going to put in the chat. But yeah. Now, I'm excited to introduce our workshop leader and 2022 fellow, Rena Priest. Rena is a member of the Lummi Nation. She has been appointed to serve as Washington State Poet Laureate for the term of April 2021 to 2023. Her debut collection, Patriarchy Blues, was published by Moonpath Press and received an American Book Award. She holds an MFA from Sarah Lawrence College. Welcome, Rena, and thank you.
Thank you so much. Ait sgwel nostalgia o helix and quanasat la tiakaya sa chweltanats and a snatchach lamisen. So pleased to be with you all here to talk about music and memory in poetry and poetry as a personal archive. I've dropped links in the chat so that as we go along, if you want to, I'll be sharing the screen, but if you want the links for later, or if you want a link on your own computer, you can do that. And we're going to be doing some generative writing prompts and kind of talking about music and memory in poetry. So let's go ahead. I'm going to share my screen. I've made a presentation to share with you all. Let's see here. Let me put it into slideshow mode and then I'll share it with you. Here we go. All right, cool. Oh, let's see. Oh no. Oh no, I'm going backwards. Okay, here we go. There we are at the beginning. So let's see. Music and memory and poetry. As I mentioned, it's a generative writing workshop exploring the poem as a personal archive. So let me go ahead and move this here. In fact, I'll just close it. There we go. So when I became Poet Laureate of Washington State, people would ask, is there a word for poem in your language? And I didn't know. So I had to go to my oxalis, to my teachers, and ask. And they said, well, it could be shwiyam, which is a story, or it could be stilem, which is a song, or it could be tiwich, which is a prayer. And so I had to think about that. I took that into consideration. This quote is from an elder who's passed on. She was like a grandmother to me, but she said, we had a means of oral instruction called storytelling. Values, behavior codes, history, geography, civics, survival skills, you name it. It was all in there in our stories. So thinking about poetry in that way, it means that working within these realms, we're working in story, we're paying attention to all of the things that for which we use storytelling, essentially our humanness. And when working in song, we're paying attention to the music in our human voice, cadences, tones, vibrations, and volumes, and all the things that are in our human language. And when working as a poet with prayer, we're conscious of how the work is beating our sali, our spirit, and part of that is memory. So I'll share a poem with you from here in the link. Let's see here. Okay. And it's called Tour of a Salmonberry. A salmonberry is a luminous spiral, a golden basket woven of sunshine, water, and bird song. You can all see this poem, yeah?
Yep, looks great.
Awesome. Okay, just checking. I'm told that the birds sing so sweet because of all the berries they eat, and that is how you can have a sweet voice too. In my native language, the word for salmonberry is alila. In Sanskrit, lila means God plays. Salmonberries sometimes look that way. Every year they debut, spectacular in the landscape, worthy of their genus name, Rubus spectabilis, meaning red sight worth seeing. Each druplet holds a seed and the shimmering secret kept by rain of how to rise, float above the earth, feel the sun, and return. And so that poem, I wrote it wanting to keep a story with me that my mom shares every year when the salmonberries are about to pop. She always tells the same story, and it's so sweet. It's like a tradition. She says, when I was a girl, Grandpa Casmer always used to tell me that if I ate lots of berries, I'd sing sweet like the birds. And it's just a nice story. And so I was out walking and I saw the salmonberries and I thought of it. And then the poem kind of comes to you, and I'm like, okay, maybe I want to keep this with me. And so, I wrote the poem. And as far as like the language in it, it's interesting to think about how language contains the values of a people. And then to think about approaching it in different ways, like the salmonberry is called all these things. It's called the salmonberry in English, and we think of the salmon and it comes in those three colors, like of the sockeye and the king and the coho salmon. So red and orange and gold. But then in its Latin rubus spectabilis, red sight worth seeing, that's kind of a fun way to think of it. And that's definitely true too. Anyway, so let's see, talking about language again, here's another poem I'll share. Let's see, we'll go back to the Dozen Nothing site. And this poem is Daffodils after Wordsworth. I will preface it saying that, well, I'll read it first and then I'll talk about it. So daffodils. The Indigenous poet writes life-affirming poems about daffodils. Her audience says, but you're oppressed. The Indigenous poet writes poems of outrage about oppression. Nobody cares. She gets depressed. The Indigenous poet gets requests for poems about being Indigenous, but all my poems are about being Indigenous. The Indigenous poet isn't considered an Indigenous poet because shouldn't you write about genocide? The Indigenous poet tries to write poems about genocide. Her poet's spirit dies. Genocide gets the job done. The Indigenous poet says, Stang sa tamquila, and writes about daffodils and the untouchable beauty of living a poet's life. So that's just kind of, again, going back to like poetry that feeds the spirit. This is something that I've always turned to poetry for, and audiences will often, earlier on, audiences would have questions and expectations about, why my poetry isn't Indigenous. And I kind of have always felt that that's limiting to kind of go by what audience expectations are of an Indigenous poem, right? Because it's so much bigger than that. We're large. We contain multitudes. Anyway, so thinking again about like poetry as a prayer and what feeds your spirit. Also, thinking about language and the language that we use. That words, the phrase in there, "stang sa tamquila," that means what the hail. We didn't have any words in our language, and we didn't certainly have any concept of hell in our traditional spiritual beliefs. And so it's kind of a fun little pun. And I almost said stang sa spachwang, which would have been with the fog, but that was too far. It's just too far. So anyway, yeah, let's see. What were my notes on this? Okay, so yeah, let's keep charging along here with this presentation. Okay. Share. All right, so again, thinking about the poem as a story, a song, or a prayer. And then also considering, where do poems come from? And I like this from Shakespeare. He says, the poet's eye in fine frenzy rolling doth glance from heaven to earth, from earth to heaven. And as imagination bodies forth forms of things unknown, the poet's pen turns them to shapes and gives to airy nothing a local habitation and a name. So I love that idea of giving to airy nothing a local habitation and a name. And a fun fact that the word poem comes from the Greek for poesis, which means to make. So essentially we're making the world in writing our poems. We're shaping how other people see it, how we see it ourselves. And that's really a very powerful position to be coming from. And Lee Miracle of the Stalo Nation says, we regard words as coming from original being, a sacred spiritual being. The orator is coming from a place of prayer and as such attempts to be persuasive. Words are not objects to be wasted. They represent the accumulated knowledge, cultural values, the vision of an entire people or peoples. We believe the proof of a thing or idea is in the doing. And that's from the Introduction to Indigenous Literary Criticism in Canada, which is an anthology she's included in. It's a pretty cool document. And then here we have Joy Harjo from her poem, Eagle Poem, and she says, to pray, you open your whole self to sky, to earth, to sun, to moon, to one whole voice that is you. So thinking of our one whole voice, and oh, here's a story from Ruth Stone about where poems come from, which I really love. So I'm just going to cue that up really quick here. And we'll watch that. Let's see. Oh, I thought I had it open. Okay. Whoops. Okay. 10 minutes.
In rural Virginia, she would be out working in the fields, and she's here, knows, does not always behave rationally, and in fact can sometimes feel downright paranormal. I had this encounter recently where I met the extraordinary American poet Ruth Stone, who's now in her 90s, but she's been a poet her entire life. And she told me that when she was growing up in rural Virginia, she would be out working in the fields, and she said she would like feel and hear a poem coming at her from over the landscape. And she said it was like a thunderous.
You can all hear that, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, cool. I've been in Zooms and I've tried to share, and they said it sounded really far away. So I wanted to make sure you could hear
Rain
it.
of air, and it would come barreling down at her over the landscape. And when she felt it coming, because it would like shake the earth under her feet, she knew that she had only one thing to do at that point, and that was to, in her words, run like hell. And she would like run like hell to the house, and she'd be getting chased by this poem. And the whole deal was that she had to get to a piece of paper and a pencil fast enough so that when it thundered through her, she could collect it and grab it on the page. And other times she wouldn't be fast enough, so she'd be like running and running and running, and she wouldn't get to the house, and the poem would like barrel through her, and she would miss it. And she said it would continue on across the landscape, looking, as she put it, for another poet. And then there were these times. This is the piece I never forgot. She said that there were moments when she would almost miss it, right? So she's like running into the house and she's looking for the paper, and the poem passes through her, and she grabs a pencil just as it's going through her. And then she said it was like she would reach out with her other hand and she would catch it. She would catch the poem by its tail, and she would pull it backwards into her body as she was transcribing on the page. And in these instances, the poem would come up on the page perfect and intact, but backwards from the last word to the first. So when I heard that, I was like, that's uncanny. That's exactly what my creative process is like.
So that's kind of a fun idea about where poems come from the perspective of Ruth Stone. I kind of love that. And here's another one by Mark Strand. Let's see. Oh, okay. Oh, there we go. Okay. This is from his poem, A Suite of Appearances. This is part 3. How it comes forward and deposits itself like wind in the ear, which hears only the humming at first, the first suggestion of what is to come. How it grows out of itself, out of the humming, because if it didn't, it would die in the graveyard of sound without being known. And then nothing would happen for days or weeks until something like it came back, a sound announcing itself as your own, a voice that is yours, bending under the weight of desire, suddenly turning your language into a field unfolding. And all the while the humming can still be detected, the original humming before it was yours, and you lie back and hear it, surprised that what you were saying was something you meant. And you think that perhaps you are not who you thought, that henceforth any idea of yourself must include a body surrounding a song. So I love that. That really resonates with me as far as like where poems come from. All of this does. The idea that you pull them from airy nothing, the idea that they come to you across the field and pour through you, the idea that they start as a humming and then, become something that you meant to say. That's all very resonant with me as far as kind of like where the poems come from. And so thinking of the idea of any idea of ourselves being a body containing surrounding a song. I really kind of like that a lot. We're going to look at a couple more things here and then to just kind of like get the ourselves in the headspace for it. And then we're going to do some writing. So let's see here. Onward we go. Oh, okay. So we got to the writing faster than I thought. I switched these slides around a little bit yesterday, so this is kind of like a brand new thing for me again. but here we are. Franz Kafka, this quote I really love too. He says, "Remain sitting at your table and listen. Do not even listen, simply wait. Be quiet, still, and solitary. The world will freely offer itself to you to be unmasked. It has no choice. It will roll in ecstasy at your feet." And so what I do here is, this is something that I love to do with high schoolers because they're like, I don't know what to write about. I get that all the time. I have nothing to write about. And so I just tell them, okay, well, we're going to do this little exercise and we're going to do it together too. We're going to just sit for a minute and try not to think. And we're just going to see what happens. So just going to watch our thoughts and see what happens. And then try to write about it a little bit. So I'm going to set a timer for a minute and you can all turn your screens off and just do this. It's kind of maybe like a little meditation, but just to watch your brain spinning and to watch what it does, just sort of kind of as like an interested observer. All right. Okay, here we go. Ready, set, go. Okay, so that was a minute. It just kind of flew by. Sometimes it takes a long time. I tried to do like a plank for a minute every day, and that's like the longest minute of the day. um, but anyways, so that was a minute. And what did you notice? Was there anything that kind of kept recurring? Or sometimes when I ask, what did you notice? People will tell me that they realized that they were hungry, or they kept thinking of a particular food, or that they kept, a dream that they had last night popped into their mind, and all the different things. So it's kind of interesting to hear what came up.
Yeah, I noticed my body. Like I finally got to I'm like, oh, my back's hurting and I've been sewing all day and I'm stressed out. And I finally allowed myself to feel that and just acknowledge it.
Yeah, that's powerful to just you stop for a second. You're like, where am I? What is what is going on here? Yeah. Anyone else?
Different sounds that I heard traffic outside. I heard the dog's collars shake. I noticed how cold I was. Just all the present moments, sights, sounds, feelings, very present.
Yeah. This is a great place to start from when we're writing is the present, or the thing that we notice, and it's just infinite. The possibilities are infinite. So usually after this writing exercise and after this little thought noticing exercise, there's plenty to write about. It's really exciting. So then we'll do that. We'll sort of head into our prompt here. So I'm going to share again. Okay. So, poet as photographer of airy nothing and things unknown. I like to say that, people talk about how a photo is worth 1,000 words, but you can't really capture the interior with a photograph. You have to do it with a poem. And so we're going to do a series of sprints. I like to, I call them sprints. I think it's Priscilla Long, who I first heard this from, that if you don't have like a lot of time to worry about it, then you can't invest, you can't you can't worry about it too much. So just doing sprints for 3 minutes, writing and seeing what comes up. We're going to choose 3 of these, and you don't have to choose them in advance. Just choose one for now, and then we're going to do 3 3-minute sprints. So choose your first one now. I'll just read them out really quick. Write a detailed description of something you wish for. Write the recurring thought from your minute of silence. Write about a memorable conversation you once had. What is a phrase you heard repeatedly in childhood? What is a question you've always wanted answered? What did you dream about last night? How do you feel? What are you keeping secret? What do you want to hang on to in this moment? Okay, so choose one and we'll go. Ready, set, go. Okay, so you've got a little bit of extra time on that one because I forgot to start it right at the right after. So you got a few extra seconds, but we're gonna go ahead and do another one. I'll share the screen again so you can see the prompts. So choose a second one and get ready to do another 3 minutes on this one. And then after the next one, we'll talk about what you all ended up with. Okay, so ready, set, go. Okay, so that was another 3 minutes. So pick your third prompt to respond to, and we'll go ahead and do another 3 minutes. We'll just head right in while you're all warmed up. Okay, ready? Set and go. Okay, so let's see. How was that? Did you guys get some good writing in? Anything exciting come out? Anybody want to share anything? What prompts did you respond to? I'm always interested to see too which 3 people chose.
Picked the one that was the recurring thought from the minute of silence. And I actually had looked at my phone right before it had started, and I have this phone case that has lemons on it. And I'm sorry, I'm a little bit sick. But so I wrote about a lemon tree that my mother had planted in the backyard when I was younger, because when I was going through that minute of silence, I actually went on this kind of like memory journey, which I thought was really interesting given the prompts that you've been talking about. So that was kind of fun to like go on this, like go to the fact that we planted it and that we always wanted there to be lemons that grew, but we never got lemons during the time that we lived in that house. And so it was sort of this bittersweet thing, which is very appropriate for lemons.
I love that. That's great. Nice. Yeah, it's interesting because, memory, like in fiction, they teach you to write about the details, like you're creating the world for people. I guess in poetry too, they want you to like have your people see what you're seeing and everything. But also like so much of, what we're dealing in like memory and epiphany and things like that in poems. It's not real, it's not concrete anywhere. And so we're drawing on these, these realities that don't exist anywhere tangible. So it's like airy nothing, literally. So that's cool that, you get some images kind of coming to you out of something concrete in your right now space. That's cool. How about everyone else? Anyone else want to share? Any of the prompts that they responded to? Yeah.
I'll share. I responded to the question, what did you dream about last night? And I think I was interested in it for the same reason that you just described, that the memory was really hazy and it wasn't concrete. So I basically just made a bullet point list of, that was me trying to remember exactly what happened. But it was a great experience and exercise. I remember I used to keep a dream journal. And it was funny, as I started listing points, different aspects of the dream kept coming back to me. And it was, that like hazy memory is kind of an interesting place to play with.
Yeah, that's cool too. It's interesting because like memory, like, okay, so I was listening to Neil Gaiman talking about meeting Terry Pratchett, and he talked about like how they became friends in a Chinese restaurant. And then he like went back and did the research and retraced his steps. They actually met in like an Italian restaurant, but he's been telling this story for years that they met in a Chinese food restaurant, and how memory is such a tricky thing, right? And in poetry, it makes me think about like that quote by Keats where he says, talking about negative capability, that the poet needs to be able to deal in like the mystery and what did he say? Without irritable grasping after fact and reason. I kind of love that, right? Because if the dream is what you said it is, you're the poet, and you get to say that, which is something that I love so much about poetry. You're creating the world as it is in the moment. I suppose it's kind of cool. It's very dreamlike. Okay, so we'll go on unless anyone else has something they'd like to share. All right, let's charge forth. Okay, here we go. Next slide. So thinking about concrete tales again and what writing is. This is from Stephen King, his book on writing. He says, what writing is telepathy, of course. So let's assume that you're in your favorite receiving place, just as I am in the place where I do my best transmitting. We'll have to perform our mentalist routine, not just over distance, but over time as well. Yet that presents no real problem. If we can still read Dickens, Shakespeare, and with the help of a footnote or two, Herodotus, I think we can manage the gap between 1997 and 2022. And here we go, actual telepathy in action. You'll notice I have nothing up my sleeves and that my lips never move, neither most likely do yours. Look, here's a table covered with the red cloth. On it is a cage the size of a small fish aquarium. In the cage is a white rabbit with a pink nose and pink rimmed eyes. In its front paws is a carrot stub upon which it is contentedly munching. On its back, clearly marked in blue ink, is the numeral 8. Do we see the same thing? We'd have to get together and compare notes to make absolutely sure, but I think we do. We're having a meeting of the minds. Okay, so do you all see the Humanities Washington logo?
Not yet.
I'm still on Stephen King.
Okay, yeah. So then I'm gonna have to go over and then click through. I wish that Zoom would just do, like if you click while you're in the presentation, it won't take you with it. So you have to go out and then go back in, but I think it'll be okay. Let's see here. Yeah, okay. Here we go. Okay, so speaking of a meeting of the minds and seeing what you see and time and space and how you can time travel with writing. This poem, I think this is a poem that I found. It's found poem, and it's directly out of the Bellingham Herald, which is the town that I live in, July 25th, 1919. Okay, and it has this epigraph by Ezra Pound, who I know is a controversial figure, but nonetheless, he says, literature is news that stays news. Bellingham Herald, July 25th, 1919. Dead Man's Point, ancient Indian burial ground, is now but a memory. It has been washed and dumped into the sea. The last shovelful of earth from the point was scooped up by the Great Northern Steam Shovel Wednesday, thus completing a demolition that started about 1890 when a cut was made at the point for Harris Avenue. Altogether, about 20,000 cubic yards of earth have been removed from the point. The last excavation made by the Great Northern to get material for filling in its trestles removed about 40,000 yards. The second attack on Dead Man's Point was made in 1901 by the Great Northern when it put through its right-of-way. Subsequently, onslaughts were made by the Pacific American Fisheries, the Bellingham Canning Company, and the Fairhaven Land Company. The latter concern washed a big portion into the sea to make room for George Hackett's cold storage plant, since acquired by the Pacific American Fisheries and converted to other uses. From time to time during the excavations, Indian skulls and skeletons were unearthed. Early this week, an Indian skull that was almost flat from the forehead back was found. The Great Northern still lacks earth to fill in all its trestles in this vicinity, and it will now remove 20,000 yards from a point south of Mackenzie Avenue. So this is, poetry as a personal archive is one way to deal with memory, but another way is to be like the collective memory for the people that they can't, things that they can't forget, shouldn't forget. I didn't change anything in that article. I broke the lines. That's it. Otherwise, it's a true document. Literature is news that stays news. But we're looking at it from. I'm trying to have a meeting of the minds with readers who encounter this for the first time, who don't know the history of, haven't been taught their own history of their people and what they did to colonize this region. And so it's hard for, I think, people to encounter truth in this way. And poetry is a way to do it, because, you know, it leaves room for people to feel their feelings about a thing, you know, and to encounter it truthfully. There's not any you know, anyone telling them how to feel, a reader how to feel. They're gonna feel how they're gonna feel when they read it, but to have the truth delivered in poetry is a really powerful way to be the memory and somewhat the conscience of the people, right? So anyway, that is most of what I have to say about memory, and we're going to move on to song unless anyone has anything that they want to say. To also always feel free to jump in and share, like you can raise your hand or just jump on in if you have anything to say. Okay, so next we're gonna go ahead and listen to Chris Hamill talk for a minute about the role of song. So let's see. I think probably the best way will be just to go there directly. Oh. It's been a minute since I've been in Zoom trying to use these features, so you're gonna just bear with me. I've been doing a lot of live workshops, and I forgot some of the more nuanced stuff here in operating in Zoom. Okay.
The Columbia Plateau. With that, I'm going to share the screen.
Here we go. And this is from a talk that was hosted by the American Indian
So this is a map
Museum.
here of what's known as the Columbia Plateau region. It encompasses parts of current day Washington, Oregon, and Idaho, and goes up into British Columbia in present day Canada. So for millennia, songs have been at the center of our lifeways. Prior to European contact, songs were integral to everyday life, whether hunting, fishing, or gathering roots and berries, the songs were ever present. And in the context of sacred ceremonies, songs were a catalyst for spiritual power and healing. So songs were not composed. They were given to individuals in dreams in a process of spiritual transmission from the spirit realm. Songs might also be received by an individual while they're
Ashley, has Rena frozen?
Yeah, I think so. But I think she just stopped sharing her screen, so she probably is going to pop back up in a second.
Okay, so why don't we write about the fact that this is probably the first time that there was a Zoom within a Zoom. Did you see that? Wasn't that cool? She was using a Zoom within her own Zoom. But what did he say? songs not as composed, but as received. So
Okay.
maybe for
I
just
think Rena is back.
Great.
I am. I'm back. Yeah. So the idea of a song being received, it kind of it Ruth Stone talks about it. Mark Strand talks about it. Lee Miracle talks about it in those quotes and materials that we got earlier. And so this is kind of going further with that idea and thinking about where the songs reside. And it's definitely something, it's the inland plateau of Washington, but it's definitely something that is at Lummi as well. Like it's in our cultural tradition about the songs that, it's a gift if you get a song. Anyhow, so we're gonna do some more writing just very quick. Oh, well, let's see, it's almost 4 o'clock. Wow, the time just kind of flew, didn't it? We're gonna do some more writing, but first let's look at the frequency scale of English vowel sounds. I love sharing this one with the high schoolers too, because we do them together. And I talk about how when you want to slow your language down, you use the lower register vowels, the oo and o and and ah. And it causes the language to become a little slower and clunkier and more serious in tone. And when you want to speed your language up, if you want your passage to move very quickly, you use the vowel sounds in these upper registers, I and A and E, and it just kind of like makes it much more snappier, and it moves it along much quicker. So this is how you control pace, and it's also how you control the feeling. The low frequency vowel sounds are ow, oi. It's like, oh, woe is me, whoa. So, you get the more like serious and solemn feeling from these lower register vowel sounds. And so when you're in a passage and you have these choices, if it feels like it's not moving the way that you want it to, like quickly enough, or if it doesn't sound serious enough, just kind of go back to the frequency of English vowel sounds, the frequency scale of English vowel sounds, and choose words that have that sound, right? The sound and the sense. And this poem, true ease in writing comes from art, not chance, as those move easiest who've learned to dance. 'Tis not enough, no harshness gives offense, the sound must seem an echo to the sense. Soft is the strain when zephyr gently blows, and the smooth stream in smoother numbers flows. But when loud surges lash the sounding shore, the hoarse, rough verse should like the torrent roar. When Ajax strives some rock's vast weight to throw, the line too labors and the words move slow. Not so when swift Camilla scours the plain, flies o'er the unbending corn and skims along the main. Hear how Timotheus varied lay surprise and bid alternate passions fall and rise. So, the idea of the sound and the sense. And then, an example of that, I listened to a lot of Kendrick Lamar while I was writing Sublime Subliminal. And the result was that I wanted to make my language have the same kind of dynamism that some of his passages have. And I give an example of his song Duckworth, how it has these like really wild cadences. And so I'll skip that just because we're kind of going for time, but let's do the prompt and then we'll have like questions or we'll say okay. So the prompt, we're going to write for 5 minutes, and you're going to think about one of your favorite songs. And if there's a favorite lyric in that song, you're going to write that down. And what about that lyric speaks to you? Is it what the song is saying or the way it's being said? For example, like in the Kendrick Lamar song, the story of Duckworth is it's kind of a violent story, and it's about surviving gang violence through kindness. But so that I don't really relate to what he's saying as much as how he's saying it. Right. And so maybe it's the same for you with your song, or maybe it's what's being said. And so this is just kind of a way to think about what it is that draws you into a piece of music, and how you relate to it, and how you can push that out in your own work. So we'll do actually 3 minutes. We'll just do this as a 3-minute sprint as well. And I'll go ahead and start the timer. All right, and go. Okay, so that was 3 minutes. And for the rest of the presentation, I can share that actually for anyone who wants to request it through email. I'll write my contact info in the chat. Actually, just message me through renapriest.com contacts, and I will respond. I'll send you the slideshow because there's more that you could think of it as homework. So I'll just go ahead and I'll just show you what else there is, and then we can have questions. So there's this quote from Kumatanitsuyo where she says, imagine a sentence is a hall with a series of doors, and each door is a possible way to use what you've already written to generate new material. So this kind of leads into the prompt of you're going to choose one of your original sentences from any of those free writes that we did today, any of those sprints, and you're going to write a few sentences to follow it and do this at least 5 times and see if you can get a poem, see what different narratives you come up with. And then that's kind of it. I was going to share that poem, The Glimmer, as a little closing. We always say at Lummi, thank you for sharing this breath of your life with me whenever we have a gathering. And so I wanted to say that to you all. So Haishka, thank you all so much for coming today. It's lovely to see everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rena. Will you take a question?
What's that?
Will you take a few questions?
Yeah, absolutely. Questions for sure.
Rena, could you say what you said just before about the very last prompt, taking a sentence? What was that again? Would you mind going through that?
Yeah, sure. So let's see here. So Kim Adenizio, she says, this is from her book, it's from Ordinary Genius, which is a really great book for writing prompts. She says, imagine a sentence as a hall with a series of doors, and each door is a possible way to use what you've already written to generate new material. And I have some poems that I give as examples. Let me try to think about. There's one called Before Clocks, but it's not published yet. It's going to be in an anthology in the spring. Anyway, so I have people choose one of their original sentences and from the free writes, and then write a few sentences to follow it, and then do this at least 5 times and see what different narratives you can come up with. And so maybe let me see if I can find Before Clocks just very quickly to share. As an example. There we go. Is that it? Nope. There we go. You all can see Before Clocks?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Before clocks, to keep time meant music, the steady rhythm of a beat, the playful plucking of a string, the full throb of a drum sounding to the steps of feet. To keep time meant stillness, the steady passing of a day, no need for rush or delay in the fluid timeline of one's own way. To keep time meant tides, the waxing and waning of the moon, the easy pace of later and soon, the warmth of the sun declaring high noon. To keep time meant seasons, the rippling rings of a tree, the changing disposition of the sea, the migration of harvests leading us to where we need to be. And it always happened right on schedule. So just kind of riffing on the idea of what life, different ways, what to keep time means. And I think the first one was to keep time meant music. And then I just kind of thought, okay, what else does keeping time really mean? Or what did it mean for the ancestors anyways? Because I visit a lot of schools, and it means every 45 minutes the bell rings and everyone gets up and goes on to the next class. And it's such a weird way to live in the world, right? And so that poem is kind of for them. But yeah, so if there's like an idea, and that thing you might have saw kind of disappear was I was going to share that I got to hear Lucy Tapahanso talking about working in form and how she came to like kind of love it and embrace it, was recognizing that it's been in our songs and chants since time immemorial, right? But the idea of repeating a thought Oh, and then another thing that she said was that if you ever want to write a sestina, just think of a good sentence that bears repeating. And I kind of loved that. And so, just kind of the repetition following and following one idea to all of its different conclusions is kind of makes for interesting writing. I think it's kind of a fun prompt. So that's kind of a way to use that later.
Thank you. Thank you. That's a great idea.
That's great. I think that's awesome. I wanted to ask a question, like at that moment when you disappeared, when you froze for a second, and that was around the whole idea that songs are not composed but are received. But then you said you wanted to just emphasize where songs reside. And I wonder if you could elaborate on that.
Yeah, so he talks a little bit, we disappeared together, but he talks a little bit about like songs being in the landscape too, that you can go to a place and have a song as a gift. And places in our interior, like if you have grief and you the songs that come from that as like soothing and healing power. Poems being a form of song or story that they're like little Easter eggs. You find them in unexpected places. So in this list up here, there's a link to under slide. Oh no, is it not in there? Yeah, slide 12, survivors of the flood. We skipped that, but it's the first minute and a half is our hereditary chief who passed away in 2020, Salih, talking about our story, the survivors of the flood. And it predates, Christianity arriving in this region, but they made in recent times, they made a song to celebrate that story. And it brought that story back to like everyone's consciousness, because otherwise, and it's now like the tribal anthem, and our youth, if they open assemblies and football games and everything else with it, but they know that story, and it would have been otherwise just kind of maybe lost to obscurity. And so songs, they're just sometimes waiting there for you to come and get them and then bring them to popular consciousness, which I kind of feel like that article, when I discovered that article, the found poem, I was like, oh my God, it's less celebratory and it's more horrific, but it felt like it had been waiting there for me to bring it back out for people to understand what happened here. So yeah, the songs, they reside, they're Easter eggs.
I love that idea of that, where they reside, but reminds me of also, it actually links to what you were talking about just before about following this phrase where it might lead, because I sometimes would use the metaphor of the Russian doll, where you open it and then there's something there, and then you open it and there's something else, and like that's the way a poem works too, that you can just keep opening up that idea, right? So that's another way to think about writing when we're into it. So yeah, I love that a lot. Thank you so much.
Definitely. Yeah, I like the Russian doll. That's a good metaphor too. I've also heard it described as a writer is given like a gem, a cut gem, and you hold it up to the light and you just twist it and see how it refracts differently, but it's all the same story. I kind of love that one too. I don't remember who said that, but I get that one when I'm like, did I write this before? And it's like, well, oh well, I'm writing it again. Here it is again. Yeah, so fun. This has been really nice for me to be here with you all today. And if there's anyone else with a question, happy to answer. Or I can turn you all back loose to dinner or cookie decorating, which is what I'm going to go do. My mom has.
So before you go, can we all just kind of come on camera and give Rena a great big NAPO round of applause? Woo!
Thank you, Rena.
you. Oh, actually, we're having a meeting right after this, aren't we? Yeah.
We
Yeah.
are. Anybody
I'll
in
stick
April
around for
or
that.
we won't take too long. But yeah, the NA Poets, if you wouldn't mind staying around, and we're going to talk about some cool projects we have for the fellows, and just a little bit about, you know, some of the things that are up in the organization. Ashley, I can't see who's here and who isn't. So are we ready to move to like go right into that, or what should we do?
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
so.
I think so. Let me just stop this recording and then start a new one so that I don't have to like splice it out. 1 second.